Hello, this is Benton Gray again. I am coming back from a long hiatus, at long last getting back into creating my Freedom Force modding tutorials. The last year and change has been very tough for the Grays, as it has for a lot of folks around the world, but I'm finally finding myself with the bandwidth and the energy to get back to creating my Freedom Force modding tutorials. So I hope that this will prove helpful to any of you out there who want to get involved with this fantastic game. So, today we're talking about the map editor, the mission editor. Now, I've sort of walked you through the functions of the various tabs in FFEdit, but today we're going to talk about what is involved in creating a new map or modifying an existing one for use in the game. Now, I'm going to teach you how to create just danger room maps, just for playing in the rumble room or the sort of skirmish mode. And I'm also going to teach you how to make maps that can be used in the actual campaigns. So let's begin by clicking on the Missions tab. I'm going to load up a mission that I've already prepared here. This is a map created by one of our community's great mappers, fellow who went by Commander Coding, whose name I can never quite say. Now, you'll notice that I clicked Load instead of Create. You can create a map from scratch using this, but I have always found it just 1,000 times easier and not really any more limiting to create from an existing map. It just gives you something to work with, and it saves a lot of time. So, once you load this up, you see that all the various fields get populated. So I'm going to walk you through sort of what each of these things is, what they mean for the map, and how we can make use of them. So we start off here at the top, your mission file. This is just where your data file for your mission is kept. And that's just telling you what you've loaded up here. Your layout file. This is an interesting thing. This is telling the game what the base layout for the map that you're using is. Now this includes all the objects on it, everything that sort of goes on it and makes it what it is, including the actual physical map itself. That's included in the layout file. Now this is just where we begin, and you can modify all of the stuff that comes with the map, the default map, here in the mission objects window. You can add, you can change, you can take away, you can even change orientations and things here. So you, for the most part, for sort of everyday editing, won't have to mess with layout files. I'll walk you through what you do with those a little later. If you want to get a little fancier, do things like changing the actual missions map, the actual mesh file that it's referencing, which can be really useful for doing a bit more intricate editing. But for the most part, you can ignore it. So that brings us to the texture directory right here. Now, this is one of the most significant and easiest ways in which you can affect the look of your map. So you can add and move around objects through the actual editor here and in the in-game editor. But it's through sort of retexturing objects in the map and the map itself, the terrain itself, that you can make a pretty startling transformation. So to show you sort of how effective this can be, I've taken this map that Commander Coding made, and I've taken out the directory for the custom textures that he created, and I've pointed this towards our basic textures directory. So it's just your mod or your main data directory, library area specific textures. That's going to include all of the textures for the game. And when you have this set, it will draw from everything in your mod, and it will also look in your main data directory for anything it doesn't find in your mod. So this is when you can, it's very easy to keep it, to keep your mods, your maps pointing to this directory, because it sort of makes it a bit more idiot-proof. Let me show you what a transformation this can make. So I'm going to load this map without the custom textures, and I'll show it to you with the custom textures. All right, so you see we're looking at a nice sort of wooded area here with some paths. It's sort of a normal, earthy looking environment. And yet, if I close this and I put in the custom texture directory that the map maker created for this map, you'll see a very different kind of environment. Wow, that is a lot of pink, a lot of purple. So this is the alien landscape that Commander Koenig created just by sort of putting new textures into the game. His texture directory tells the game to use his own set of textures instead of the default ones. And so the trees, the grass, everything is re-textured and sort of reskinned, which can give it a very different appearance. And now it can be as simple as, you know, recoloring the grass or your trees, but you can also remap objects that look like something completely different. I have done this a lot in my own maps, in my own modding, to take a sort of standard Freedom Force object and recast it as something that I need as a prop in one of my missions. So your textures directory can be tremendously useful. So we come back here to the DCUG, your art, library. Now if you've got your map pack installed, you're going to have two different sets of art directories for your props and your map objects. You're going to have your area specific, your default directory, which is going to have the regular, let's see, like Cuba and the European base, Blitzkrieg, Berlin, all of the Freedom Force 2 directories. Now, as I said, when you have the game just pointing to the regular textures directory, without that, without a subdirectory, it will automatically look in your data art directory as well. And so it'll go here even if something's not in your mod. So, for example, I don't have a lot of the objects that are specific to Freedom Force 2 actually in my folders here. If I click on Cuba, you know, there's almost nothing here except for the terrain file, which is, there's a terrain file that I've modified, the actual map file. But, you know, Blitzkrieg, the same way. Most of the objects are missing because they exist in my main data directory, so I don't have to put them into my mods as well. But if you take something and you change it, or you create a custom version of it, then you've got to include it. But you'll see up here, there's all these textures directories. These are all the various textures directories that are for various custom maps I'm using. Each of these has a subset of the textures that are necessary for a given map, and they've been changed or updated or tweaked in some fashion to create a different visual effect. This is another one of the reasons why it's super handy to use an existing map as a basis for what you're doing, because if I just come up here and I just create a new map, and I want to use a custom texture set for it, I've got to go out and figure out every single texture that map needs, and I've got to track those down, pull them out of my texture directory, and put them in a map folder, a textures folder. But if I come and I want to use that map that Commander Koenig used, then I just take his directory, click, and here's everything I need. Now I might want to replace or change those textures. I might want blue grass instead of purple grass, but I know what they need to be called, and I know which ones I need. So it's a great way to save yourself a lot of work. So textures can tremendously change and transform a map. The name entry right here is pretty obvious. Now what might be a little bit confusing is that this is the name that you're going to see in the game and in your save files. It won't show up, it won't change the actual folder of the mission file. And your actual mission files are found in your data or mod directory missions. And you see I've got quite a few in the DCUG, as well as various missions that maps that I'm working on and using as references. So Caliculac is right here. And inside we're going to find everything we need for a danger room map. We're going to find the mission data itself. That's the actual combination of all this stuff that gets created by the editor. We're going to find danger PY, which just tells the game how to use the map in danger room. You can just copy this from other maps that you're using. And that's really all that the game needs for this to be a rumble room map. Now, for it to be used in a campaign, especially an EasyScript campaign, we need a bit more. So let me come up here to my Aquaman missions. You'll see there's a bit more in here. So we still have the mission DAT, we still have the danger room DAT. This can be played in the danger room as a rumble room mission, just the same as anything else. We also have a mission PY and mission text, and a base PY and a base text. These are the EasyScript Python files that tell the game how to use this map, or how to use these maps in a campaign. I can have this particular mission play a base scene and move on to the actual mission. You can just copy these from the FFX models or from my mods. My mods should have the latest versions, which aren't necessarily in public release. Right before M25 left, the author of EasyScript left the community, he gave me the latest versions he was working on. So those in the DCUG and I think in Marvel Adventures and the others are a bit more updated and have a few more bug fixes than the latest release version. But all you really need to do if you want to use a mission that you're creating, a map that you're creating in a campaign, is copy over the base Python text and mission Python text files into your new mission folder. And I'll show you how to deal with those in other tutorials. So back to our actual editor. Well, we see how to change the texture director. We see how to change the name of the file. What about all of this stuff? What about all the stuff that actually makes up the map itself? Well, I've shown you what it looks like when we launch the in-game editor. It's a really nice 3D editor. You can see the changes you're making in real time. There's one more thing that we need to talk about, though, before I show you how to actually edit maps in the editor, in the in-game editor, and that is these two boxes down here. So you'll see layout and objects. Objects are things placed on the map that are not in this default level layout file up here. So these are things added sort of after the fact. They'll include usually the characters and sort of other set dressings that are added after the fact. Or if it's a custom mission, it could include everything on the map because the default stuff has all been removed. But sometimes you'll encounter maps that have, especially the built-in, the sort of vanilla maps, they have all those layout files unchanged, and you'll have something weird happen where you'll move something or you'll delete it, and then you'll come back to the mission and it will be right where it was to begin with. And that's because this tricky little bugger has to be checked in order to affect anything that's in the default layout. So if I uncheck this and check this, you can see this custom map by Commander Koenig only has one object, and that's the actual map file itself, which you'll see right here, the terrain nif. Every map will have at least that. But many maps will have a lot of various objects there. So if you want to change anything that's in that level layout, then click that. In general, if you're editing, you want to make sure that you have both checked so that any changes you make on the map will be updated to the actual map file, and you won't find it yourself in a position where you delete a building and you come back and that building's right back where it was. It can be very maddening. Well, so let me show you how the actual in-game editor works, and I'll show you a map I'm working on for my Aquaman campaign. So this particular map is based on one of the built-in FF1 missions, Shadows Fall, and I've just taken that map, I've cleaned out, you'll see the level layout here, I've cleaned out a lot of the stuff that was in here, a lot of the basic stuff. I've left only a few of the set pieces, the sort of set dressings, and I've got a couple of my own objects here in the object section. So I'm going to click both of these, make sure I have the ability to edit both of them. Come here and you'll notice that I'm using a custom texture directory, an underwater cave directory. That's what this map is. It's an underwater cave. So I'm going to launch it, and I'll sort of show you all how to use the visual editor. Alright, so first off, just like in the main game, you control the camera with your mouse wheel or with Alt and your mouse movement. You can pull out nice and far and see the whole map. And you can see this is a set of 3 caverns that I've retextured using the method that I described. So this was all brown rock, and I've sort of just wallpapered it over with my own custom textures to make it look more watery. And this map had a bunch of buildings and various things on it that I've removed. So let's walk through the basic commands that you can use on the editor. So first and foremost, C opens up your object menu. This is what you use to put stuff on the map, to add characters, markers, lights, and individual objects. Now you can add characters here or from your characters directory. You can add FX directly to a map. You can add cars, or let's say we want to add the Batmobile. You can drop that directly onto the map. We can also add buildings and props. So that's what you're going to be doing. A lot of your editing with maps is going to be just changing the props that are in place in sort of their layout, their disposition. So to do that, you'll notice these 2 different art directories that I mentioned earlier. So area specific, that's stuff from Freedom Force 2. Area specific 1 is stuff from Freedom Force 1. Now, I've got most of the objects from Freedom Force 1 in here to be used, but this will draw on your mod directory, and it won't draw on your data directory. So if you want to add stuff to your maps, you need to copy it over to be used by your editor. So at the moment I'm working on putting some buildings here. This is going to be a lost Atlantean colony, and so I'm dropping some of my retextured buildings around, and I'm going to move them around and make a nice tableau. So I come, hit C, I come to Area Spec F1, where my Freedom Force 1 buildings like these are. These are from Columbia University map from the first game. That's in my city directory, my Columbia University objects, my buildings. So I've got all those buildings here. I can pick various ones and put them around here. So I'm going to use building 3. I'm going to use building 6. Oh, I think I've already got 6. I need the other one. So building 8, I think. I do want another one of those, but third time's the charm. Building 7. There we go. All right. So, one more thing about the objects directory. You notice that I went directly to what I wanted here, but that's because I'm pretty familiar with what the various objects are in these directories. But as you're starting to make maps, just feel free to dig around, find various objects, drop them in your maps, see what they look like. I like to go through the folders, go through the directories outside of the editor, and use an if scope to open up different objects and check and see if I think a certain thing will work. But a lot of this is going to make a certain amount of sense. It's going to have a certain logic to it. You're going to find city type objects in the city directory. You're going to find buildings and street lights and well, not cars. Car will be in the vehicles directory. But you'll find air vents and antennas and things like that here. And the Empire State objects are going to be things that was a map that was sort of up in the clouds. It was at the top of the skyscraper. So it's going to be things that decorate the top of the skyscraper. Your warehouse objects, it's going to be a lot of sort of grimy looking warehouses and barrels and crates and things like that. Little objects, these are going to be more like neighborhood type objects. And each of these is going to make, like I said, a certain amount of sense. So Pan's Island, it's going to have the Greek themed stuff from the Pan levels in the first game. The Robot Factory is going to have a bunch of high-tech stuff, so on and so forth. So you can sort of guess where stuff is going to be, but you'll just have to dig through it and get familiar with what is where. So once we've got this stuff, what do we do with it? Well, you can, as you've seen, just drag and drop objects around, which is what you'll be doing probably 90% of the time. But, well, let's say I like this okay, but I really want it to face a different direction. If I hold Z and then click on an object, I can turn it horizontally. But I can also get fancier. If I hold X, I can turn it on its axis vertically. So I could even have this building sunk into the ground a little bit if I want to. If you turn it one direction, you can turn it another as well. If you hold Shift and drag in and out, you can raise or lower the object. Now it's going to follow your camera angle, so where your camera is where it's going to go. So that's going to be a little bit tough to get used to at times. It can make it a little tough to place things if you're not careful. If you hit space, you're going to make a copy of the item. It's with the same heading and same settings. Delete will delete it, of course. And those are the basic sort of hotkeys. There's one more that can be pretty useful, and that is the G key, grid. If you hit G, then you turn on Synaptic grid mode, which means that things will sort of align to an invisible grid, which can be nice when you're making sort of precise movements with an object. You want to really make sure things line up. You can use that. All right, so those are some of the basics of how you interact with the map editor. But it's a really incredibly flexible tool. You can, with a few keystrokes, create something fairly intricate and interesting. I can clone rock, put it on top of my building here. I could even stack one building on top of another. I could have a building sinking into another. You get a ton of flexibility with what you do. Now, not everything you do is going to work out great in the game. For example, buildings can collapse, and if you did this where you have one building sticking out of another, they may look a little funny as buildings start to collapse and fall apart. but the editor is in general very easy to use and quite powerful. You'll see here I've got I'm experimenting with putting a water texture over the map to since it is an underwater mission, and trying to get it to fit just right. Takes a bit of doing. So other things to mention include setting lights. You'll see these here. Now you can drop a light directly onto a map with this button, but probably the easier thing to do is to drop a positional marker and put this where you want your light to be. So let's say I want the top of this building to have a beacon on it. I drop this right here, position exactly where I want it, and then I can drop out of the editor using the Windows key, come to FFEdit, find that marker, and I can change its type. This is the other half of editing maps. I can change this into anything I want. I could make it into a character. I could turn it into another object. Let's go here. There we go. Now you'll notice that's pink because that particular object's texture is not in my texture directory here. But I can also turn this into a light. Now lights are a little different than most items in the game. Their color and intensity are controlled by their X, Y, and Z coordinates here. You'll find an explanation of that in the FFEdit instructions, which I'll remind you about at the end of this video. So I can do all kinds of things with this. I can also turn this into an ambient sound. Now the sounds are also different in that you don't choose a template for them. Instead, you simply write the string that corresponds to the sound that you want. Alright, so a couple of different tips about dealing with this side of the map maker. If you, let's say, I've dropped this building here, but I really am not sure about it. I'm going to come back over here. I find this one, and let's say I really like to replace this with a different building. I can come down here and I can change its template, point it at a different template. But if I do, that update is not necessarily going to take. So the way to change things from here and not have to open up the editor, the in-game editor, and delete the object and replace it, to simply replace the object using this part of the editor, is to first change it to a marker that'll maintain the object's heading, direction, everything that you've done to position it. Save, and then reload the mission. Come back here to find my building, and then I can change it back to generic and put whatever I want to right there, and it's going to work out a lot better. It'll actually update and keep that change. One of the little eccentricities of the program. All right. So let's say that you want to get a little fancier, though. Let's say that okay, you've moved items around, you've changed this in and out, you've done some basic editing, but you really want to dig into what this thing can do. Well, that's when you need to come back to the level layout file. You'll remember that I said every map has this actual map mesh file, the terrain NIF. Well, where that's located is in your layout file. So let me load up another one of my Aquaman missions, and I'll sort of show you what you can do when you get a little fancier. So you'll notice here that this is pointing to a custom level layout file. I've come to my directory, I found the base file, and I've modified it. So level layout, art level layout, and you can follow the directions here. It's O2 Cuba. I copied that folder and file, and then I edited the actual layout. Now, all I really had to do was change this. So this is what tells the game where to find the actual map NIF. So this was originally just this part of the entry, and I added the customization to point it to a modified version of the NIF, which lets me do more than simply put new textures in the same places as old textures. It lets me add directly to the map. I can add objects directly to the map NIF. That's how I've done some of the things I've talked about in my developers journals for the DCUG, like creating an oil platform map that has 2 levels that actually work in the game. It allows you to do a lot more with the game itself. So when you're ready to do that, you click Import, you travel to your new directory, and you load it up. Once you've done that, you can actually modify the the NIF files themselves. So I told you earlier, all I had in Cuba, in my Cuba folder, was my terrain NIFs. Well, here are the map files themselves. This is the actual 3D map. Now, you'll see here that this is actually textured, and that is because one of the handiest things you can do in NIF Scope is click on Settings here, and you can add texture directories where the program will look for the textures that a particular NIF uses. In this case, I've already got a whole bunch here. You'll see you can change where it looks for what and when. And here's the one for this map, so I'm going to move it up to the top. And there, it automatically populates it. So the cool thing that you can do here, other than just add objects directly to the map, is you can actually change the mapping of textures. So this map's already been modified. This was the Cuban airfield map from the second mission in Freedom Force 2. And if you've played the game, you may sort of recognize it, but you'll see that it looks a little different. This one's been textured for to be sort of the ocean floor, to be an underwater mission for Aquaman. But when I did that, I had a little trouble because this whole section here was designed to be the tarmac of the airfield, and so the textures that I was using didn't display right. Even if I renamed the textures and made the map use what I wanted, it still wasn't quite right. So I came through and you can click on map sections, and you'll see that things aren't always laid out in the most rational of fashions. But when you click on these, you can come over here to your details list, open it up. You're at the editable mesh when you click on piece. But under that, you'll find the nigh texturing property, and under that, you'll find the texture it uses. So here I could change this to anything else I wanted to, and then all of the pieces that are connected to that section that use that particular texture will be changed to have whatever texture I apply. So that's a nice way to change the way things actually display in the map itself. So here in my my second Aquaman mission map, I'll show you a few of the other cool things you can do. You can see once again how dramatic a change the texturing can make. These are all just sort of regular bushes that show up in the bushes and shrubs and weeds and such that show up in the regular game. Terrestrial, earthly things. But Commander Koenig, whose work I'm basing this on and who's done most of the heavy lifting here, has retextured them to look like coral and various sort of sea plants. And they look quite good. But you'll see that I've got all of this sort of redone to create a new feel. You'll see I've sunk some objects into the ground to make that sort of ancient, ruined feel. Some things are sort of off-center and turned in various ways, so they seem a little bit more happenstance and worn. You also will see that, let's see, I have a couple of custom objects on this map, because you are not simply limited to the objects that exist in the game. So I took the existing object, the pillar that you'll see around here, and I added a new object to it to create a new prop for my mission, for my story. So you can create your own props and your own objects of all stripes and sizes for use in your missions. And I'll sort of mention how to do that briefly once we finish this. But before I end this video, I want to talk a bit about how to create a mission that you can use in a campaign. How do you actually create a map that you can tell a story with? Well, we've talked about what we need to do on the file end, how we need to add those Python and those text files. But what about the map itself? Well, in order for a map to be used for the Danger Room or for your campaigns, it has to have markers. And that's these positional markers that you saw me add earlier. So here's one. You can do all kinds of things with these. Their directions, their orientation can affect when you spawn in characters and things like that. But you have to have a couple of different types of markers. For Danger Room missions, you have to have skirmish spawn, which looks like this. And that can be anywhere in the map. That's where your various entities will spawn for a Rumble Room match. For a campaign, you've got to have your hero file, your hero markers, and for an easy script campaign, you've got to have encounter markers. So I'll show you what both of those look like. So your hero markers are hero _ 1 through 4. That's really important. I always forget, and I will put hero 1 and try and run a mission and wonder why it doesn't work, and then only later discover that it's my own stupidity. It's the story of my modding life. But you also need encounter markers. Now these are for EasyScript. Encounter markers are locations where any kind of random encounter can happen in an easy-scripted mission. So I talked about this a bit in my EasyScript tutorial, but just as a reminder, you need these kinds of markers just for EasyScript to recognize the map as something that it can work with. And then to create your own specific settings, you can have your own custom named markers. So here's sub 1, where one of my encounters happens. You'll see that you've got various markers at various orientations where different types of characters will spawn in. So I've got villains coming in, and I've got also an object coming in. So sub 1, object 1, you'll see right there, it's a little hard to see because it's under the surface a little bit, because it's a pillar that's going to be spawned as if it's sort of sunk into the ground a ways. And that will be for the object in that particular encounter, of course. You can add characters directly to a map. You can add minions, even villains, I believe. And they will act pretty much like a lot of the minions and the bad guys in the main game. They'll be hanging out until your character gets close, and then their AI will turn on and they'll attack, and they'll sort of follow their basic AI. Characters that are part of an encounter and are spawned through an encounter with markers like these will have a radius around any part of that encounter. So once that radius is triggered, all of them will begin acting the way they're designed to for that particular encounter. So you can use a mix of both, and that's something I started doing as I've gotten more used to modding, to make the load of encounters a little lower, make the impact on processing and loading times a little smaller. Just have villains on the map, minions on the map, to fill in space and to create interesting obstacles in ways that aren't tied directly to encounters. So that it makes it a little easier on my end and a little less overwhelming for a player, I think. And tends to make for more entertaining missions. Alright, I think that covers everything that you need to know in order to get into mapping. It's super easy. The use of the editor is pretty intuitive. It's got good documentation. I'll be around the forums on Freedom Reborn if you have any questions. I'm by no means an expert on any of this, but I'm probably one of the most knowledgeable folks who's still active. So I'll do what I can to help you out. All right, folks. I hope that has been helpful. Take care. Bye.